many times we've talked about this, but 8 years ago we joined this club because my riding buddy moved to St. George and we no longer had anybody to ride with. And you've heard us all say this probably, but we joined the club so we could go on rides and have places to go. Now we wouldn't leave the club because of the friendships. So getting to know all of you and having these close friendships are what it's all about. We love it. Kevin, you want to come up? I want to introduce Kevin to all of you. You've probably met him, so he doesn't have to listen to all this stuff we're going to go over. But 2 or 3 years ago, when Misty and I wanted to come down to Manti and start exploring this area, I asked who's the guy that knows all the trails and has all the connections, or most of them, and Kevin Christensen is the name that kept coming up. I'll let him tell you what his official title is and what he does here in Sanpete County. I will say this, because he won't want to take credit for it, but the dinner that Misty has prepared for tonight, Kevin and his organization has actually paid for all that food, and then Misty prepared it, and it's for us as a club. So please give him a big round for that.
So yeah, I just work for the Sanpete County Travel Office, so this is what I do, is I tell people about all the amazing trails we have and invite you down. So I just want to thank you for coming down, and it means a lot to us to share our beautiful mountains with you guys. The mountains right now, the leaves are just spectacular. I hope you have a great ride. Hopefully the weather will be great for you. And just come back again and bring your friends and tell your friends and have fun. That's what it's all about.
Thank you. Okay, so just a real quick recap of where we're going to go today. I won't bore you with all the details, but this first ride is what we call the South Loop. We're going to go over here to the south end of town, down by the sheriff and the prison. We're just going to go up on the mountainside there and just go right up the face, and then take what we call the lower Sheep Creek Trail all the way back into the main road where Milky Falls is located. So we'll eat there at Milky Falls, and then we're going to go up on top to Skyline or Skyline Drive, and then go way down, take another nice little fun trail up on a mountain, and then just kind of wind our way back to what's called 6 Mile Canyon that takes us down towards Sterling. Then we'll take the county road back over by the prison. Hope we won't lose any there if you have outstanding warrants. And then we'll come back to town. Now, one thing we're going to do, it's a little different that we hadn't planned on until yesterday, is when we come back into town, we're not going to come here to sign you out. We're going to wind our way over on the east side of town. And by a show of hands, how many has heard of Rat Fink?
Oh, yeah.
Most of us? Okay. There's a Rat Fink Museum up here.
Oh, you want me to model it?
Oh yeah, come on over here.
There
we go. Dave, put your hand up like this when you do that.
Yeah, there you go.
So I've been talking to her, and I think that's going to say NUATV just right with that little thing. Every year she'll have do us a new one.